we're going to turn our attention to a couple more Breeders' Cup races now. Del Mar 901, first of all, is the Longines Breeders' Cup Turf. Mile and a half for this. Got a previous winner in there as well. Rebels Romance 5-2. Emily Upjohn 7-2. Luxembourg 9-2. Jayarebe 5-1. Farbridge 9-1. Tens and Bigger the remainder. And Rebels Romance has, well, largely been in excellent form. Obviously, won in Germany when last seen. It was an excellent win out in Hong Kong, and prior to that, he was winning out at Meydan, Rachel, when winning the Longines Dubai Shima Classic. Now, there was an element of silly about this race, given that Joe Moreira and Justin Pallas sort of inadvertently created two groups, and it meant that the only one to make up any ground really was Liberty Island. Now, I think that did play to Rebels Romance's strengths, who was on the front end. However, it's all too easy to detract from this horse, who ultimately gets it done more often than not.
Well, he's won 14 times in his career. He's won nearly $10 million. This country don't give him the respect he deserves. The rest of the world does, because he's basically won pretty much the rest of the world's major races. Just here 10 months ago, we were sitting in the studio when he romped in the Wildflower Stakes at Kempton. It's like, oh, good, he's just won a listed race, how nice. And then he went and took the world before him in the Emir Trophy in Qatar, Shima Classic in Dubai. He's
also won at UAE Derby for good measure.
Okay, in the context of the Breeders' Cup, he is the 2022 Breeders' Cup Turf champion. Let's not leave that out. And ahead of going into winning that particular race, he won the Grosse Prix van Europa at Cologne. He did the same thing this year. I think he's in better form coming into the race. Into this race this year. He does like to front run. He doesn't have to. Stall 11 will create the odd bit of issue for William Buick, but they start at the top of the backstretch, so they have a little bit of time to sort of get themselves sorted out. But with the likes of Luxembourg and Wingspan in here, along with a couple others, I don't necessarily think that he's going to get it all in his own way, all up front, because there is a lot of confirmed, signed-on front-running speed to his inside, but I don't think that's going to be an issue, because William Buick can just take back, and more important, for a horse his size, even if he sits 2-3 wide, as long as he doesn't get boxed in or stopped in his run, that's the best form. Him drawn outside versus inside checks a lot of boxes.
And you know, the other point about you do see whichever track it is, and I think you look at this race at your tighter American turf tracks, and you think, well, you got to be on the speed, but it's not necessarily the case. When he won at Keeneland, he wasn't right on it. Yabir was a horse. Was that here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was here, wasn't it? It came from way off.
Yeah, Talismanic.
Yeah.
Slipped up the inside for Andre Fabre, big white face. No, you don't need to be up with the pace. In fact, you don't necessarily want to be up with the pace. It's actually quite difficult. I mean, one of the old adages as a handicapper, when you do Del Mar, is unless you can get a loose and lonesome, the turf course is quite difficult for front runners to maintain it. It's Bermuda.
Why?
It's Bermuda grass. You ever try and hit out of a Bermuda grass rough with a golf club?
Yeah, loads.
Mm-hmm. How hard is that to get through?
I feel like that's what's held me back. Yeah.
Long list, but no, I mean,
because it's harder to run through. Or
it's stiff. I mean, I'm not a grass expert, but it's just harder. It's stiffer to just get through. So you
laughing at, Steve?
Get a bit of cover. But
there's a scene very similar to this in a film called Caddyshack, and I can't get it.
And we're gonna have Carl Spackler in a little bit in the mile. So. Yes, but I think he's one of the main horses in here. Quite rightly, I've been hot on Jayarebe running in the Breeders' Cup Turf since middle of the season. Probably when he was coming up the hill in front at Royal Ascot, you're going, that's a Breeders' Cup Turf horse. Partially because he's in the colours of Dangerous Minge, so that wins the Breeders' Cup. Brian Meehan has a fantastic record in the Breeders' Cup. He's 2 for 4 with it. He was out there this morning on a hack pony leading Jayarebe around the paddock. Both him and the pony looked totally bored with the whole scenario, but Jayarebe was bouncing and he looked really well within himself.
Okay, so anyone going mile and a half, question mark, you're not worried?
Not worried, because this is a race in which you can do that. There have been 5 horses who have stepped up for the first time in this race. 3 have done it in California, because if you're ever going to find a short mile and a half, it's going to be in California. So it doesn't bother me. The way he also travels through his races, he's got 10 furlong speed, but he's not stopping when he hits the line. I mean, his run in the dollar last time out was really good, and we can't forget that form was franked, because the 5th Anmont came out and won something a couple of Saturdays ago. So the form in its own right has been quite franked. I like how he's well put together. He should scoot around an American-style racetrack, and his dam was a 1.5 mile listed winner. Besides, Brian Meehan doesn't ship horses when he doesn't think they have a really legitimate shot, and that's enough for me.
Okay. Do you have a thought on the race, Steve?
Do you know what? I did think Jayarebe, to be honest. It was always a horse that I did like, honest. Why didn't Rebels Romance go for this race last year?
Because last year was a complete wipe of a season. He came out of the gates. He had 2 bad runs, and then he came out of the gates in New York and actually dumped his jockey, and they just decided to pull stumps after that, and then they brought him back. Kempton was his first run back, and then the season, I think...
Because that was right. So that was at Saratoga, and then he went to Aqueduct, and it was a disaster.
They pulled stumps on him, because I think his 4-year-old career, where he travelled extensively, might have just caught up with him. As we saw in the video, if you saw him at Kempton, if you saw him at Ascot, he's a unit of a horse. I know he's 6 now and he's a gelding, but I just wonder if when he was a relatively light and inexperienced 4-year-old, all of that world travel just took a lot out of him, that he kind of bounced at 5. So luckily, being a gelding, really have nothing better to do, so they just decided and it's worked. I mean, how many...
We need to discuss Emily Upjohn, because she's not as good as she used to be, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, does she need to be as good as she used to be to win this?
Yes. Okay. Positives. John Gosden has won turf, obviously in Able back in 2018. He's 1 for 12 in the race, but when he brings fillier mares, he's 1 for 4 with 2 placed efforts. Those 2 placed horses, the Fugue and Jayarebe, they have a lot in common with Emily Upjohn, the silk she's going to run in. Yeah. Frankie getting back aboard, 4 for 7 aboard.
They were better when they turned up in the race. I'm not saying a better filly, but they came here and probably better formed.
No, because all of them had won a Yorkshire Oaks, but her Yorkshire Oaks was 2 years ago.
She's only beaten 1.25 lengths by the Arc winner, though.
But yeah, if you take that literally, she's got a chance. But my problem with Emily Upjohn, does she want it that much these days? Maybe she'll turn up and decide that seeing Frankie again and seeing the sun shining, she might like it. But my impression of her this season, because she was even closer to Blue Stocking earlier in the season at the Curragh, so I just worry how much she really wants it.
Why are some races? So why is this turf race the European race, as opposed to, say, some of the juvenile turf races or the turf sprint? Or do you know what I mean? Why this way? Is it just that by the time you have perhaps a slightly older or middle distance turf horse, the Americans are gone, nah, we're not. It's not for us. And what? How do you split up the turf race into what's going to suit the Europeans or not?
Is it not the distance is the key?
Is that it? 1.5 miles? But the mile.
I'm guessing Rachel would know more than me, but I've always thought that it's the distance that the Americans aren't breeding 1.5 mile horses.
No, we're breeding 10 furlong turf horses. This was one of the original Breeders' Cup races, one of the original 7. So I think that's gone into the European psyche that 41 years ago, this race showed up on the calendar, $1 million race. It's now a $5 million race. Trainers aim for it. It's a really good end-of-season race for those horses that maybe don't want Hock-Deep Mud at Longchamp or something. And that's been in the psyche. The juvenile races are relatively newer. Turf racing in America is very much on and up. It's now almost, I'd say it's probably 55-45 dirt turf. They're breeding more turf horses. There's more turf racing at the higher end being brought in, but that's more 3-year-old turf racing. It's almost not sexy to be a middle distance turf horse in the States. The races are there, but they're dead easy to win, which is why Charlie Appleby brought over a huge string this summer and pretty much mopped up turf racing.
It's as if we've been gone forever. but soon it'll feel like we've never been away. It's showtime.